If Anthony Albanese manages to win this election, the conventional wisdom that campaigns matter will have to change, because by any standard, he's had a shocker so far. Not knowing the unemployment rate wasn't just an innocent mistake that he claimed it was ignorance. And economic ignorance should be hard to forgive in a would-be Prime Minister. In the end, though, governments don't run the economy, they only influence it. So for me, it's his border protection stuff-ups that should disqualify him from the nation's top job. This is the issue, more than anything else, that has destroyed previous Labor governments, which, you'll remember, swiftly dismantled the Howard government's border protection measures, resulting in nearly 1,000 boats, more than 50,000 illegal arrivals by sea, and well over 1,000 dead. By and large, it's business that shapes what happens in the economy, but it's government and only government that determines what happens on our borders. And this is where the opposition leader has quite literally been at sea. There was his error late last week where he first dismissed the need for offshore processing because turning boats around, he said, made it redundant, only to have to recant himself later. Here he is first.
If people smugglers seek to take advantage of an incoming Labor government and do send more boats, will you be tough on boat turnbacks, and will you consider an offshore resettlement deal?
We'll turn boats back. Turning boats back means that you don't need offshore detention.
Someone must have got in his ear, because then here's his subsequent attempt at a mop-up.
Do you just clarify whether or not you plan on ditching offshore processing?
Of course not. It was established in 2013 when I was the Deputy Prime Minister.
So what do you mean when you say turning back boats means you don't need offshore detention?
No, well, that's the preference at the moment. There aren't people have gone into offshore detention in recent times because the boats have been turned back. It's been effective.
And then yesterday, another error. Here he is, first agreeing that Labor would keep Operation Sovereign Borders and temporary protection visas.
Do you remain committed to Operation Sovereign Borders, and if so, do you support the retention of temporary protection visas?
Yes.
And then coming back to correct himself, saying that he'd misheard the question, and that of course Labor would not keep TPVs, even though they're a key element in Operation Sovereign Borders, along with boat turnbacks and offshore processing.
Earlier on, I heard half the question and didn't hear all of it. Labor's policy is to support Operation Sovereign Borders. We support offshore processing. We support resettlement in third countries. We don't support temporary protection visas.
I've never seen such a schmozzle. Let's be very clear. Effective border protection means three things. First, it means turning boats around so boat people don't get to Australia. Second, it means offshore processing so that any illegal arrivals intercepted on their way here are not brought to Australia and don't get to use our legal aid and activist lawyers to wear down the system. And third, it means temporary protection visas, so that those that do make it to Australia, let's say for medical treatment, don't end up here permanently, that they'll never get the permanent residency that the people smugglers sold them. A three-part strategy that stopped the boats under John Howard and stopped them again under Tony Abbott. And it's a strategy that falls apart, doesn't work when any part of those three elements, turnbacks, offshore processing and TPVs, is missing. The policy has to be that tight, that rock solid, if it's to work. That's what Labor has never understood. And that's why they could never stop the boats. And that's why boats would inevitably start up again were the government to change. The opposition leader is confused about border protection because he doesn't really believe in it. He's on the record against mandatory detention, even though it was the Keating government that introduced it. He was against offshore processing until the Rudd-Gillard government half-heartedly reintroduced it, and still sometimes he's against it now. And he's definitely still against TPVs, even though they're an essential part of denying the people smugglers a product to sell. Maybe enough people had already made up their minds against the government before this campaign had started, perhaps this isn't making much of a difference, although today's poll, showing the sharp fall in the opposition leaders' ratings, tells me otherwise. In any event, both leaders are sticking to their strategy. Scott Morrison, burnishing the government's national security and border credentials with a new patrol boat announcement today in WA, and Albanese with his back now against the wall, a bad poll to reflect a bad first week, kicking off his attempted reboot today with yet another Mediscare campaign and a new one too on pensioners.
We make absolutely no apology whatsoever for standing up for the pensioners of this country who are petrified that this cashless debit card will be extended to them. Labor will abolish the cashless debit card.
Bald-face lie. There's no basis for this whatsoever, yet expected to be repeated over and over again. Indeed, it's a scare campaign that made it to the front page of Brisbane's Courier Mail. In a state with plenty of older Australians, it's a tactic that desperate Labor campaigners are hoping can get them back in the game. This week is a critical week for Labor. Can Albanese recover and get back in the ring? Or will it go from bad to worse? More unforced errors, more brain fades on big issues. For the government too, there's now a narrow path to victory that requires everyone in the coalition team, from the PM down, to deliver an error-free effort, with plenty of Labor boosters in the media looking to amplify anything that might go wrong. All in all, I tell you what, Wednesday's Sky News People's Forum will be critical in who wins week 2. I, for one, I won't miss it for the world.